Andrei Tarkovsky. Hello and welcome back to Filmmaking Giants Who Changed How We See the World. If Bergman taught us to face the soul in a small lit room, and Bresson taught us to strip away anything that isn't the soul's work, Andrei Tarkovsky steps outside into wind and water and fire and tells us that time itself is the subject. He moves the camera as if it were a weather system and treats the cut like a wound that must be justified. He hangs water in the air and lets it beat on glass until memory takes shape. He sets a tracking shot gliding the length of a flooded floor and asks us to feel duration the way a tree feels seasons. He calls his method sculpting in time, and the phrase, so often repeated it has become a tagline, still deserves to be heard literally. He models a block of lived time, removes everything that keeps it from carrying meaning, and then places it where a viewer's attention can learn to breathe at a slower, truer rate. He grew up with poetry in the house. His father, Andrei Tarkovsky, wrote verses that could hold both dirt and starlight, and with war outside the door. He trained as a geologist's assistant, carrying a hammer and map into landscapes that were unafraid to outlast him. He studied music and drawing. He arrived at VGIK, the Moscow Film School. When the cameras were heavy and the instruction was heavier, he found allies, one by one: the teacher Mikhail Ram, who could tolerate an unorthodox pupil; the cinematographer Vadim Yusov, who could make the element of water a narrative instrument; later, the composer Eduard Artemiev, who could turn sound into weather; and crews who could accept the difficulty of a director willing to wait for fog and rebuild a wall to make rain fall properly. He liked to say he distrusted effects, and yet he caused weather like a demiurge. It is only a contradiction if you confuse ornament with instrument. For him, rain is not an effect, it is a grammar. Ivan's childhood is the beginning, the story of a boy turned scout by a war that treats childhood as a disposable luxury. And already the camera has learned to move through spaces with a steadiness that feels like pity refusing to hurry. Night drains the voice from the earth. A birch forest appears like a hymn. Dreams interrupt the military plot like remembered light. And when the boy is lost to the war and the room grows quiet around the news, you feel the film's vow to keep the dignity of a life by refusing to allow violence the last word in a shot. He won a prize at Venice and returned not to pageantry, but to prayer. Andrei Rublev is his declaration of scale, not a biopic of a medieval icon painter, but a chronicle of a soul trying to remain responsible to beauty while the world bleeds. He composes in long takes, in tableaus that behave like frescoes freed to breathe. He allows mud to become a character. He lets the camera walk beside a horse slipping on slick ground and expects us to notice that grace is costly. The bell-casting episode near the end is a film within the film. A village boy, claiming to know a secret he doesn't, rallies a town to make a bell for a prince. The camera lingers on the pits dug for the mold, the clay patted by hands that do not know whether they are working for glory or for a future humiliation. When the bell finally sounds, the boy confesses to Rublev that he lied about knowing how. The bell's voice is therefore not mastery, but mercy. Rublev, who has refused to paint since violence broke his faith in images, understands perhaps work precedes worthiness after all. Tarkovsky closes with icons, the camera caressing brushstrokes until gold seems to be a temperature. He allows color to arrive only at the end, as if to confess that the true image, the one an icon attempts, has always been a kind of light we do not deserve. Solaris sails to a planet ocean that thinks. A space station circles, haunted by visitations the ocean conjures, embodiments of the cosmonauts' memories and guilt. Tarkovsky inherits a genre built from hardware and turns it into an anatomy of conscience. The tunnels that lead to the launch pad look like arteries. The camera lingers in them, as if to say that travel outward is always travel inward first. The visitation who returns to Kelvin, the psychologist at the film's center, is his dead wife. She cannot be killed. She reforms. She cannot be convinced. She learns to wish to be human and cannot. The film refuses to hurry her. Padded doors, condensation, cloth, mirrors. The camera collects surfaces a soul must touch to become real. Artemiev's electronic score does not decorate. It hums a question no instrument on earth can ask. When the final image arrives, rain on an island that is not an island, A father who is not a father, holding a son who is not the boy who left. You wonder whether the ocean has learned to pray or only to imitate mercy, and whether there is a difference. Tarkovsky would answer that the difference lives in the time a shot can carry. Mirror is the one that cannot be summarized. It behaves like thought remembering itself. Wartime and after. A mother's hair, wet, like a scripture the camera cannot finish reading. A printing press that clatters like policy. A field bending to wind that feels like a rehearsal for a generation's grief. A doctor crossing a stile. A barn on fire described by fire, not by commentary. A boy running through dew that will never dry. A poem read out loud by a father whose voice seems to forgive everything, even when it cannot. The film interleaves black and white with color and step tints newsreel fragments next to family portraiture and allows the boundaries between them to dissolve. The voiceover has no interest in explaining. It remembers, precisely, the way a body remembers, through textures and temperatures, through the length of time a hand rests on a table, through the sound of a door that won't quite shut because wood swells in damp. The film is often described as difficult. The difficulty is the same that faces anyone who has sat in a kitchen where two generations speak and understood that narrative will not fit. Tarkovsky refuses to make it fit. He builds a house where memory can be messy without being contemptible. Stalker is a pilgrimage through a landscape that has suffered an event nobody agrees on how to describe. They call it the zone. Somewhere in it there is a room. If you enter, they say, your deepest desire will be granted, not the desire you recite to impress your friends, the one your life actually serves. A guide, the stalker, leads a writer and a professor into that terrain. They throw nuts, wrapped in cloth, to test a path that refuses to be learned. The camera moves ahead of them, not to show off, but to make visible the patience the path requires. Water stands, grass collapses and lifts. Dogs appear and do not explain themselves. Their speech is simple and becomes profound against the silence. The stalker's voice, at key moments, is calm. The room they finally approach is filmed from the threshold. Tarkovsky refuses to enter. It is one of the most disciplined refusals in cinema. He will not grant us a view he has not earned. He will not pretend to show what cannot be shown. The last shot returns to a kitchen. A child sits at a table with glasses. Trains moan. The glasses move. Perhaps it is telekinesis. Perhaps a hand we cannot see. Perhaps the aftershock of a passing freight. The miracle, he suggests, is never spectacular. It is always close to dishes. Nostalgia crosses a poet into exile, Italy for a Russian, and lets homesickness become a theology of distance. A man carries a candle, attempting to cross a drained bath from end to end without letting the flame die. He fails. He tries again. The shot does not cut. His body shakes. The camera refuses to pity. When he succeeds, bells answer. He collapses. In another film, that would be melodrama. Here, it is obedience. The shot, so often mentioned that it risks being reduced to a challenge for film students, contains Tarkovsky's ethic in miniature. Duration is the form of care. Care is the form of truth. Truth is never rushed without being distorted. He is not interested in long takes as a sport. He is interested in the experience of time as the only honest way to represent an action that matters. Throughout the film, he frames ruins without contempt, households without glamour, fog without romance, a dog without the need to justify itself. The Sacrifice, his last film, opens with a man and a child planting a dead tree. A friend tells the story of a monk who watered a dead sapling for years until it lived. Air raid sirens interrupt the afternoon. The world seems to end. The man makes a vow. If disaster can be reversed, he will burn his house and give up his voice. It is an absurd vow. It is the only kind worth making. In the long take that follows, a house burns in one craning, dizzying shot. The camera almost misses it. Legend says they had to rebuild that house and burn it again because a camera jammed. The myth is tidy because the truth of his practice is untidy. To demand that the world obey the logic of your film, you must be prepared to live with mud and smoke and ruined wood and the patience of crews who love you enough to persist. The film ends with a child at the base of a resurrected tree, whispering, "In the beginning was the Word," and then he is taken away. Tarkovsky, ill, would die in exile months later. The tree stands in our minds because he gave us time to plant it. Underneath the famous images, the rain indoors, the room with water to your ankles, the horse in a cathedral of fog, there are technical habits that redefined the craft. He distrusts coverage, the insurance practice of filming every angle so that the edit bay can decide. He composes sequences that only exist because the camera and bodies and weather understood each other. He floats the lens on a dolly or crane without hurry, often at human shoulder height, so that the frame feels like a companion with a pulse, not a supervisor. He uses slow, sorcerous pans to reveal the exact amount of new information a conscience can bear. He tilts rarely and with ceremony. He loves foreground matter, wet glass, grasses, cords, frames inside frames, because moral life is lived with obstructions in the way. When you look around a thing to see what matters, you become responsible for what you see. He lights by subtraction where subtraction tells the truth. Mirror-lit faces, backlit dust. And by addition where addition is honest. Windows blown out because outdoors is brighter, a lamp hectically warm because the room is cold. He cuts on completed gestures, not mid-gesture, unless interruption is the point. The edit is therefore a period, not a dash. Sound, with him, is never mood music. It is ontology. Artemyev's electronics are not futuristic. They are intimate, like a voltage felt through a ring. The rumble of trains is an undertow that ties kitchens to destinies. Dripping water is not symbolic. It is the world reminding you it exists on its own timetable. Dogs bark, not as cues, but as citizens of the frame. When he uses recognizable music, Bach, Pergolesi, it enters like a sacrament, not a soundtrack. Silence is not a gap. It is the positive presence of time without decoration. He writes in his diary that most films lie about time by cutting it into a rhythm that flatters impatience. He builds sequences that let impatience appear and then asks you to stay anyway until something truer than wanting arrives. Attention. He welcomes error. In Mirror, a gust of wind arrives in a room where nobody planned for it. A curtain lifts like a startled breath. He keeps the take because the world collaborated. A bird flies through a frame. He has the sense to interpret the bird as a thought rather than as a problem. This is not superstition. It is craft. If you have built a shot with enough openness, the world can correct you, and correction is the higher form of authorship. He trains crews to keep faith with that openness, even when producers knock on the door. The final films, made away from home, could have grown defensive. They do not. They grow patient. Censors fought him often. Andrei Rublev was shelved and truncated. Mirror was accused of obscurity. Stalker was filmed and refilmed after a laboratory ruined the stock. Exile came not as a dramatic announcement, but as the accumulation of delays and suspicions and refusals. He wrote letters and notes and interviews that suggest a public man willing to spend words defending the conditions under which art can be honest. The diaries, published later, show a private man willing to admit fear and vanity and the small meannesses that exhaust self-respect. He worried about money. He worried about his son. He worried that forgetfulness would make his labor trivial. He went on filming because, as he says in Sculpting in Time, the vocation of art is to prepare man for death by teaching him to attend to life. He is not melodramatic about that sentence. He treats it like a job description. Why does his method still matter for people who will never put a camera on a dolly in a flooded room? Because he made a case for duration as ethics. In households and hospitals and companies alike, speed routinely insults reality. We keep asking people and processes to deliver their meaning at a rate that precludes meaning. Tarkovsky's shots bring the opposite proposal. If an action deserves to exist, it deserves to be given the time in which it actually occurs. Cross a room. Light a candle. Carry it without letting the flame extinguish. Carry a conversation to its last honest sentence instead of cutting away when discomfort arrives. If you manage teams, there is a Tarkovskyan version of the calendar. Build in blank lengths where correction can occur. Refuse to schedule only deliverables and schedule attention. What emerges in those lengths is not waste, it is the life your work claims to serve. He also gives organizations a grammar for memory. We love to pretend that institutions are rational machines. They are not. They are households of remembered harms and vows, good jokes and humiliations, rhythms and smells. The films demonstrate how to respect the reality of memory without drowning in it. He alternates present and recollection without hand-holding, because he trusts the viewer to recognize the furniture of recall. A sound first, a temperature, a face seen at the wrong age, a hallway cut into rectangles by afternoon. You can translate that into policy by allowing the past to be spoken in the room where decisions are made. Put the old ledger on the table. Admit where the floor still creaks because nails were rushed the last time. Tarkovsky's long takes are not only art, they are an audit practice. For filmmakers, the specific craft takeaways are tactile. When you borrow his long take, ask why the shot must be long. If the only answer is prestige or anxiety, cut. If the answer is that you need to watch an action occur in the time an honest witness would give it, proceed. When you borrow his water and wind, resist the superstition that they are poetic props. Use them the way he does, to teach the frame to be porous to the world. When you borrow his refusal to enter the room, learn the discipline of thresholds. Show the line, show the body that stops at it. Let the audience imagine the trespass they have earned. When you borrow his sound, let trains and drips and dog breath replace temp tracks. Above all, when you borrow his patience, do not confuse it with slackness. He is never slack. He is strict with time. That strictness is how he honors us. There is an equally useful lesson for critics and for any audience tempted to praise slowness as a guarantee of depth. Tarkovsky's gift is not slowness, it is concentration. Plenty of slow films kill attention. His shots concentrate it until edges brighten. The difference is moral. He does not ask us to adore difficulty. He asks us to adopt patience as a method for reaching what is otherwise unavailable. When, in Nostalgia, the candle goes out and the man returns to the start of the pool to try again. Some viewers groan, some leave, some hold their breath, some discover that their breathing has become the film's. That alignment, your lungs keeping time with a stranger's task, is the experience he wants to give us back, because modern life steals it without asking. He died young, but his images continue to give shelter to other people's courage. A poet in Tehran holds the camera on a windshield so rain can explain a problem better than dialogue can. A director in Taipei lets a corridor teach loneliness. A woman in Brussels films a sink full of pots and restores labor to dignity. A man in Mexico lays a child in water and refuses to leave until the child is seen. They are not imitating his icons, they are obeying his ethic. The ethic is portable. Give the world time. Do not interrupt truth with commentary. Let the elements finish their sentences. Accept error when it commits grace. He kept saying that the point of art is to help people be less alone, not by entertaining them into comfortable forgetfulness, but by transforming isolation into solitude, a form of aloneness that contains others respectfully. His long takes are invitations to solitude. His refusal to insist that we stand inside every secret is respect. His use of the elements is hospitality toward a world we did not make. He changes how we see the world by teaching us to see time inside it, not just outcomes, to see patience as action, to see memory as the texture of a present, not its enemy, to see mercy where spectacle would prefer an explanation. If you want to try him at home, you do not need to construct a flooded room. You need to slow down one scene of your day to the speed at which reality moves. Carry a cup of tea without spilling for the length of a conversation you would normally end with a performance. Watch your child or your colleague cross a doorway and notice what their body tells you about what they carry. Write the letter to the person you wronged and do not decorate it. If you must make a vow, burn something you can afford and keep the vow. Plant a dead stick and water it as if belief were not a feeling, but a schedule. Tree will teach you whether you are ridiculous or faithful. The camera is not required, time is. Thank you for listening to this episode of Filmmaking Giants Who Changed How We See the World. Produced by Selenius Media, music by The Artificial Laboratory.